be done with it. But the most important thing, at least in my mind, is the idea of showing the proof to the world that we can actually embed identity into a song and that we can activate financial distributions through smart contracts to artists. And I sent Greg a proposition specifically addressing a very preliminary plan, but a basic plan with listing artists that we have relationships with, potential collaborators that could help us make this happen, and the concept around 30 songs, 30 artists that are able to embed their identity. We need to figure out.
Let's associate identity just
Sure.
For now. Yeah, let's use the language of associate identity.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we associate identity, there would be anyone that has a song that is released commercially. There's a songwriter or two or three. So those people would be embedded. If there's a record company, we would embed a record company into that platform. And again, we're dealing with independents. We're not talking about Sony or Warner Brothers. But the concept really is, can we create a smart contract that, number one, identifies these people, allows for the songwriter to write into the contract that information, put the up onto RSong, and then see a distribution of funds. Our number one barrier right now is what funds would be distributed. The 30-song compilation does not warrant a subscription model. It's a use case. We're proving the concept that it can be done. Because based on the research that I've done out there, and I really would like everyone on this call to correct me if I'm wrong, nobody has proven the case yet. Nobody has successfully been able to upload a song, embed identity, and distribute funds. And if we have RSong and we have a few other technologies that are within reach being built on our chain, we have the possibilities of being the first ones to do it and hopefully do it correctly, at which point we have options in front of us. Option one, we can present this to others that are trying to build a similar vision and sell/license that technology to them and potentially onboard them to our platform. Or B, we can explore the possibility of us or an outside investor coming on board or financing our own streaming service. But before all of that, the first case here is to prove that this can be done.
Yes, I think we're a long way towards that proof, right? The main thing that we're the main component that we're missing is, of course, the the identity solution, or enough of the identity solution that that we want to rely on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to that end, I really think that we have to work with not just one single supplier of that solution, but with multiple suppliers of that solution.
Yeah, and I think between Life ID and Mycelia, there's got to be something there that would allow for this to happen.
Yes. I think that they're moving in the right direction. I think it's getting closer. I think that I've been putting a lot of time into describing what we can already do with the existing platform that we've got, so that people have an understanding of what that identity solution offers. In particular, we have a notion of claim that always comes to the point of view, is associated with a capability, and therefore is associated with multi-agent reasoning, and can also be revoked, or time bound, or passed on. And all of those things are, essential for the kinds of things that we want to do. And that's built into the platform. So and I think it's really important that when we go to these identity providers, that they be able to take advantage of these features from the get-go.
Yes. So with those that are building out identity solutions on our chain, and specifically we're talking about Life ID and Mycelia. What can we do if this is a direction that we want to go in activating RSong, 30 songs, just to start there? What
Mhm.
do we need to do to utilize or help those entities fulfill the technology, or at least help us build the white label version of the technology that could then be applied to RSong?
Mm,
And how far down the path is Mycelia with their project?
mhm.
And I'll also add up there. I mean, we had conversations with them, Greg, regarding their need for financing, and if they're still looking for it. I mean, it might not be the co-op, but it might just be, they're not asking for that much. And I'm pretty sure with a few phone calls, I mean, look, I can gather that money together with a couple of friends, and then we can have that. We can help support them to get them to the finish line. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that that's a, it's an important thing. The mycelia solution, if you look at the code base, it doesn't run on any blockchain right now.
oh, I thought they were building on our chain. Okay.
So ultimately, we would like them to build on our chain, but unless or until we sort of get a good, crisp, clear commitment to have an on-chain based solution, um, that we, that's where all of the discussion of financing really has to land. Is there has to be a commitment to an on-chain solution, and in particular, an R-chain solution.
Mhm.
And this is why I keep making the points that I'm making about what's already built into our platform.
Correct. Hmm. Hmm.
Right, right. So I mean, it's like the code base currently does not run on any chain, not even Ethereum.
Huh.
Uh, um,
So how would they be able to implement their plan if it's not built on any chain?
that's a wonderful question.
I mean, that isn't that the point? Isn't that the reason that they're bringing their this plan to the world, is because of what smart contracts can enable? But if they aren't building on any chain, how will they be able to execute the plan?
Right, right.
Daryl, do you have any insights around the world of mycelia? And I'm specifically asking you because obviously Resonate helps support them. So I'm just wondering what you know.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Daryl.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so from my understanding, Mycelia released their alpha version this week. I don't know a lot of details about it as far as what you guys are talking about, the back end stuff. But the way that I've always been perceiving the intention of Mycelia is that it is always has had the blockchain as an integral part of the solution. So to me, the way I perceive Mycelia is that it's a protocol that has a recommended set of standards that have been developed in order to provide the most amount of interoperability amongst all the various entities involved in the music industry. And so Imogen has kind of broken down all the various many ways that provenance can occur. And so the idea is that eventually it will be ported over to a blockchain solution. So yeah, right now, as I understand it, it's not operating on any blockchain, but its intention is that's definitely the intention.
Yeah. All right. And question. Um, when Resonate were supporting Mycelia, and I don't know the numbers or anything of the sort, but I'm aware that there was some financial contributions there. Was there ever a conversation that they were going to be built on our chain?
Yep, there was, as to my knowledge, there was talk between. So I guess you could say that our liaison between the three entities was Claire,
Yes.
and um, and so there were discussions, to my knowledge, that were being done between all three entities, and I do believe that there were some meetings between our dev team and Trayvon and other people.
Okay.
So it's kind of in limbo, right now.
Okay.
In many ways, but Imogen is forging ahead with her world tour and trying to kind of. I think her vision is to current vision is to kind of get a consensus from as many different parts of the globe as she can on how to build this and doing it very grassroots, and we're still communicating and hoping, just hoping for the best. We're actively still working on things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much in favor of the general idea. I think the thing that's kind of really important in all of this is not so much uh, the idea, but the workable architecture, right? And the general idea is a good one. When I reviewed the architecture, I understood that it was kind of an alpha, but in order to get to something that I think is workable, it has to be on chain, and we have to, and that has a lot of implications for the architecture. And the more important thing is that there are just a number of features that are missing, that would be there for free if we were to, start to put it on on both a notion of identity that was object capabilities based, and a blockchain that had certain characteristics. And so, and I, it took a while to get to the architectural review, and then post the architectural review, after 2 weeks of review, I invited the mycelia team back for the follow-up, and I haven't been able to get them to come to a meeting for a follow-up so we can discuss funding.
I think if we were going to move down the path of putting out an RSong compilation per the proposal that I sent you, Greg, I think it would be really important for us to have a follow-up and a few conversations with mycelia to see where they're at, and to see if it's a reality, because it's a huge part of what everyone within the world of music and blockchain is working towards. This is the piece, and if they are somewhere down the path, even if it doesn't have all of the depth of architecture that a mathematician such as yourself would be looking for, I think if we can get a version 1, because 30 songs is easy, it's manageable, versus let's adopt a 10 million song catalog and see how we can make that work. And depending on where they are with their tech, if we can prove it, if we can bring it onto our chain, if we can, here has always been wanting to generate millions of transactions on the platform. And there is no question in my mind that when mycelia is up and running, it will do exactly that. Because if they're able to build an industry grade standard for how this is going to work for the future of all music, it will additionally be able to dovetail into other arenas in embedding identity into virtual assets. And I think it's an important piece for basically the future of all things that are related to blockchain, especially with arts and entertainment. So all that said, what I would like to what I'd like to do, Greg, is separate from a recorded conversation, just kind of go piece by piece of what I sent over to you. Maybe, I know Ned has been really interested in this whole thing as well, and maybe include Ned in that conversation. Just kind of chop it up, and if we identify exactly what we want to do, we then send a proposal over to Mycelia to invite them to the conversation as part of this overarching plan of what we're trying to achieve. Because I think we've got one piece that's ready to go, and they've got another piece that I think both sides can really help each other in all of this. Did you guys hear me?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Fabian?
Now I hear you.
Okay, all right. So, so I just want to be clear. There are three things that we need to think about in this in the context of identity. As from the point of view of the song management, the metadata together with the provenance at point of upload or point of origin,
Yes.
is all that's necessary, because what we do is we establish, we have a clear record of what asset is being played, and then we go from the asset to the metadata. And as long as the metadata was established at the point of origin, there is no further need for identity at this time in a solution. The only real need for identity beyond that basic level of functionality is if you want to include the song in other songs, such as remixes or other kinds of things.
And that's a future proposition, because I would imagine.
Right.
And songs, easy. As we start there. After, when we walk down the path of remix culture, it's the artist, give me your stems, embed the identity of your drummer, embed the identity of your bass player. Those things can go out there. And then once you put into the smart contracting of how funds are distributed, let's say it's 50-50, take my stems, you make a remix, there's a 50-50 split. It can create a whole new thing within the world of remixes. And, I've had very preliminary conversations already with Ableton Live and with Native Instruments around this concept. I will be meeting them when I go to the NAMM show in California in January to continue these conversations. But again, the proof case, the use case needs to start. It really has to start here, because if we can get this one piece right, it starts opening up the doors to a whole other world of opportunity.
Right. So my point then is that there's no need for any additional identity technology. Right. So let's go through it again.
Yes.
So if we are careful about the point of origin, and right now our organizational architecture, as well as our technical architecture, has a single point of origin. Right. You have to come in through the cloud service to upload. That the cloud service, the RSong side of the cloud service is responsible legally for making sure that provenance is established at that point.
Yes.
So if we trust that point of origin, then the metadata associated with the asset is, maintains the chain of custody. Then every playback of that asset goes back to that metadata, because that's associated on chain already in our architecture. And then the metadata says how to distribute the funds according to the contributors' contractual arrangements with each other.
Exactly.
So at that point, there's no need for any additional identity technology. None.
Okay. So
the only reason we need additional identity technology is if we're talking about extended use cases, right? And this is what I kept trying to say. Without an on, like, once you have an on-chain architecture, the identity solution is a lot simpler, and even the extended use cases and the other fancy stuff is made with fewer moving parts than
is necessary than has currently been considered by a lot of the identity providers. And even though it has fewer moving parts, it has more function, more capabilities. So this is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to just like if we just go through the use cases very carefully, and we talk about what tech is necessary to do what things, I think we'll find that um, we can get a lot more bang for buck. And that's why that's why I've been, it's a delicate conversation to have.
Yeah, and it's also it's not my wheelhouse. Like I know on
Understood.
my side, I can bring the songs, I can bring the relationships, I can see the vision very clearly. But when it comes
Sure.
down to the actual architecture and how the various technological components play with one another, I'm not that guy. So
Understood. Yeah, but I think that most people, we can kind of get to the common sense portion of this. The common
yes.
sense portion is, if we are in agreement about the provenance of the content at the point of upload,
Hmm.
and we have that recorded appropriately in metadata,
Yes.
then there's no further identity solution needed for, you know, for the currently contemplated RSong use cases.
Right. But look, we need one point of entry. If that one point of entry is called mycelia or life ID or something else, there is one point of entry, and we can either walk down the path of building something from scratch, or we could recognize that there's things that are already in the circle that have already started taking those steps that we might want to look at integrating, considering that they've already gone down the path.
No. So again, that one is actually useful to disambiguate. So Life ID has never contemplated being a point of entry
Mm,
for provenance, right? Well, they're a foundation that contemplates, a protocol for self-sovereign identity. So, the place where identity comes into play is in the metadata itself. The question is, how do you represent the entities that are going to be compensated, um, or yeah, that are in some contractual arrangement according to the metadata, right? And so if like in the metadata associated with a particular audio asset, um, we could just have the string image and heap, right? And that's sort of okay, but there are potentially a lot of Imogen heaps out there, or a lot of agents that go by the moniker Imogen heap. So the question is, how do you take this identifier and make it in such a way that it's robust and can be applied in many instances. That's the place where the identity piece comes in.
mhm.
But from the point of view of a basic use case of um, uh, sending out blockchain-based remuneration, we don't care because it's just an address on the blockchain.
Right. All it is just triggering the disbursement.
Right, and then it's up to whoever that party is to make sure that they're in control of the private key for that address.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's the only identity solution that we need. We don't
Yeah.
need anything else fancier.
Hmm.
And so that's, again, that's kind of the point I was trying to make, is
Okay.
and I think that anyone who's been following the discussion um, around blockchain and music would be able to understand this set of requirements.
Hmm.
Yeah. So uh, I fundamentally believe that identity is a very, very important and critical piece of the puzzle. But for this use case, We don't need a lot of fancy stuff. We
Mhm.
need I believe we've got all the pieces that we need um, in order to go forward with the elaboration of our song. But I feel like I'm monopolizing the conversation. So let's open it up and get other people's opinions on this.
I'd like to hear from Ned and see what Ned has to say about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that Greg said. I think the friction point is when the song gets uploaded and securely identifying the artist, and I think we have all the pieces to do that with one of excuse me, adapting one of our wallets, or I know they've been working on like an in-browser MetaMask or something where somebody can provide a private key, do the upload, and then once that is on the blockchain, every time the asset gets played, the smart contracts know exactly what they need. And the cool thing is that's all hidden behind the scenes, so it's not exposed and it's secured by the blockchain. And it probably wouldn't take much of an effort to actually. So there's one question I had. So in our proof of concept, do we want to create a self-managed upload portal? Or do we see that, at least for the initial POC of these 30 songs, that we would do the back end? And I say that thinking that it probably really wouldn't be a big effort to build kind of a bare bones functioning upload portal.
I think we want a bare bones function portal for artists to follow direction and say, upload the song, fill in the blanks, name all the musicians that are on it, associate it with your performing rights group. Like all those various pieces need to be caked in so that 30 people are able to do it. And if we can get those artists to videotape themselves on their iPhone going through the process and we edit that down as content, that'll further help our initiative.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, so just one other thing I want to bring up, and I'm sure it's really kind of pretty obvious, but this means that anybody who is running some kind of platform where they're using native instruments, for example, or
Ableton or
Ableton or something, that the device they're running it on is internet connected. And I say that because I used to use a hardware device. I forget the name of it. It was kind of like a metal box with a CPU, and it was built to run MIDI apps. And I don't know, thinking back, now this is 8-year-old tech, that device, I think it was called, what was it? It wasn't Reactor. I can't remember the name of it. I could find it, but it was a really cool device. It was expensive, and it offloaded all the CPU processing from my computer. But that device was connected in my studio via MIDI, and I doubt that it had any kind of internet connection. Now, again, that was probably about 8 years ago. But that would be a prerequisite for using any of these samples, right? Because you have to be able to query the blockchain for the whole rights.
Right, and I think the world of samples and sample libraries is something further down the path. I think right now, the conversations that I'm having with those companies, I've only had one with each of them, but they understand the vision.
Okay.
Again, going back again to the core of this 30 songs, how do we begin? What is the entry process? What is the portal? Let's start testing with, our own original music that belongs to us. That way we can say, oh, we did it. Now let's start it. And then we can start onboarding a couple of other folks. And through this process also, it's going to be I need to put together a contract. That way we can start reaching out to the talent. The talent list is pretty extensive. And there's some people here that, they've got, I put together a document that I can share with this group, but please don't post it on YouTube or anywhere on the internet. I will copy this link. Hang on a second. I'll post it up there in a minute, but it illustrates the artists, their social media reach, it shows that if we're able to pull these artists together, we can probably get a lot of traction. for the platform. But it's, you know, it's going to take a small team to do this. It's going to take a little bit of money. You know, these are things that we need to discuss and make sure that you know, everyone on board within the RChain circle understands that this is a direction. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But we need to make sure that everybody's on board to understand that we are going to do this and pull off 30 songs and build out a timeline and devote time towards making this a reality.
Cool. Yeah. So, hey, Greg, do we have those use cases documented anywhere?
I mean, we do actually. In many ways, a lot of the basic or core use cases are actually documented relatively explicitly in Kayvon's documents, right? Because his architecture documents sort of describe the basic pathways with respect to the
Right.
with respect to the you know, the requirements.
Okay. And that was the basic use cases, not some of these extra things that you had alluded to.
I mean, cases are, you know, upload the material.
No. But you had said besides the basic, there were some more advanced usages.
The advanced usages
Yeah.
are they're you know, they're really fancy, and I don't I'm not I'm documenting them in other ways.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, because what we'd like to do is to be able to do things like, you know, on the music side, you'd like to be able to do things like give someone a song for a certain amount of time, or for a certain number of plays, or you know, for certain occasions. Those are all use cases, and you can do that with our capabilities, right? Because, you know, we have we basically because Rolang fits so well with the object capability model, we end up being able to provide all of the object capability style stuff, where you hand a capability, and that capability is a proxy to the asset, and that proxy allows you to introduce all kinds of additional conditions, additional checks. You could imagine that, you know, here's an interesting use case. You know, multi-sig access to audio content. You know, you can't listen to this audio content unless you also have these other parties around who are signing off on it. You know, so that could go a long way with a playlist, right? So
Yeah.
you can have a playlist that's locked to a certain audience, and that can be used, you know, for imagine that you want to demonstrate that a particular audience is present before you unlock audio content, right? Which might be used to control, like for a DJ, it might be used to control head count and things like that. So these are all kinds of crazy stuff that I'm not documenting in this setting, because right now we're just trying to get this basic stuff off the ground. But I wanted to, you know, like, I'd love to hear what Kayvon thinks, or what Daryl thinks about the sort of these basic scenarios, and make sure that, you know, we haven't lost some feature or functionality, you know, by treating it in this simple way.
Yeah, this Kayvon, I don't think we have, and I'm afraid I missed part of the beginning of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But going along what you just said with the multi-sig contract and the object capability model, we could also make those contracts temporal contracts.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. So you but again, these are all fancy things, and I think what I've been trying to argue is that the identity solution necessary for the first wave of functionality is just at the point of origin. You associate the metadata with the asset, And in the metadata, you have addresses for each of the parties that have to be compensated. And that's it. Like whether or not those addresses really point to human beings or bots or Martians or angels, we don't care.
Right.
And, it's just, it's the, those addresses are are the proxies for the parties that have represented they should be compensated for the use of this content.
Right. Right. And I'm thinking with my mouth open. I don't have the solution quite yet, but there will be multiple types of metadata. There will be metadata as you described. There will be metadata that describes the assets themselves and how we can formulate a bunch of files and formulate a product. So there will be metadata like that. There will be metadata as far as how it's going to be policies, basically provide these products to users. So the way so the way I had kind of was thinking to approach this is going by what we were talking earlier, that there will be a way that these assets could be uploaded. But when we say upload, so let's, for the sake of argument, say there is a repository like an Amazon S3 or something where people can, there is some sort of UI in front of it. They can push all these assets at different times, and then at some point they're done, meaning that all the pieces are there. Then that should trigger an event somehow, and then we start packaging it. And once we have a complete package, then we feed it to our pipelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like I said, I'm thinking with my mouth open. There is a lot of detail here, and I know what would help me is to just sit and have some dialogues where we just outline these data as to what they look like, what they represent, and then I can take those and then start formulating payloads from those.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Going through these kinds of discussions in detail and thinking through thinking through it from an experiential or on an experiential basis is the way to go, right? And that's sort of that's why I believe so strongly in user stories is exactly that. The one piece that I think has to be a part of the process that you've described is who is verifying the provenance associated with the assets that are uploaded. So as soon as we set up, a kind of upload farm, as you're describing it, then it becomes very easy for someone sitting in a basement in Kansas to upload a bunch of audio content and make claims about the provenance of that audio content, right? But who's actually, so they could upload all of David Bowie's catalog and then claim that they are the rights holder to that catalog. But it's RSong that is on the hook to make sure that the claims about the provenance of the content and are true. So there has to be a verification process, and it becomes harder in a kind of at industrial scale to, like, if you're uploading terabytes and terabytes of audio content, then how do you inject the verification part of it into that process?
Interesting. Yeah, this is a problem. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, because with RSong we have 3-4 assets that we just own.
Yeah, right. And we have personal relationships with the people who provided those, so we know them, we recognize them. But as soon as we open this up, it becomes more challenging, and that's why I think in the beginning we want to grow this a little more slowly in terms of personal relationships, and part of the reason for doing that is because we also we build trust relationships with those people, and they and on the basis of those trust relationships, they then can turn around to other people and say, yeah, here, I really enjoyed this process. The people were very involved. They were, they were very helpful, etc. And so they become, and so word spreads about it, if that makes sense. So I think there has to be, in addition to the technological support for the process, there has to be a social process. So in many ways, this is kind of like the KYC process that the co-op did for investors in the private sales. We knew that KYC was going to be time consuming. I mean, I did a lot of it myself. I was on the Zoom chats with investors, and as a result, they could see me, I could see them, and it developed into a trust relationship that has been a part of building the community of the co-op. I think there's a similar kind of thing that has to go on here, where as a part of the upload of content, we need to have these personal relationships. We need to take this moment to get to know the artist, and and as a part of the verification process, um, because it will serve both the artist community and RSong in the future. Does that make sense to people? I mean, I don't know.
Oh man, Greg, you are just speaking my language. This is so much of what we've been working on with Mycelia, and that has to do with the aspect of attribution. We need to properly attribute the works to the proper people before we can have proper provenance. So the attribution comes before the provenance, and so the methodology that we've been talking about involves a key factor is the term the identity social graph, which completely connects with what you're talking about, where we're talking about a system that is trustful rather than trustless. So the best way to verify that you in fact are the person who wrote that music is through the community that you are part of. And the more people that can vouch for it and verify it, the kind of stronger your proof is on the fact that it's your thing. And so there's always going to be issues of dispute. I myself was involved with one that ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court of British Columbia in Canada, with Sarah McLaughlin, and I know a lot about from firsthand experience about how painful it is to be in a process where you've worked with somebody closely, making music together, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, you're enemies in a courtroom, and it's not pretty. So it's something that's kind of dear to my heart, and so the need for attribution is vital. And I think I agree with you, Greg. The only way to really get true attribution is through community attachment.
Yeah, yeah. So then taking those ideas to just to this process, the upload process, I imagine a kind of KYC process that happens when we're onboarding digital assets. Um, so before someone is able to upload an asset, we have to go through an interview process. So we interview them, and just like before, they hold their identity card, whatever that is, and it's an identity card that we trust and believe in. And then maybe the creative passport is one that is a solution there, but I don't think it's quite to the point where it's the same as a a US passport or a Canadian passport. But certainly if Sarah McLaughlin or Bjork, is on the camera and holding their passport next to their face, um, then we can say, okay, you are who you claim to be, and then there's a further process that is about their relationship to the content that they're about to upload onto the platform, right?
Yeah.
And so I could also I could actually see here now, how that might be a community effort, right? Because if it's just one artist uploading the content, but it's really content that involves the work of a lot of others, then how do you know that they speak for the team that put together the content, or that they speak accurately for the team that put together the content? So that's an interesting problem that I hadn't really thought through, Daryl, and I'm glad that you brought it up. I mean, I guess. Well, I'm open. I'm open. What would be the right solution here?
So to me, this is everything that we're talking about is intrinsically interwoven in a music-based social network, because
I agree with that. Yeah.
The actual process of attribution for the work of music in the first place requires that kind of community verification, which is the thing that we're dubbing the identity social graph. And the idea of that is that the wealth, let's call it, could be defined by your reputation. So the better reputation you have in more communities, the greater the wealth you have in this kind of society or system, and the more accurate people can perceive your works, the attribution of your works to be. So it becomes something where people are naturally incentivized to verify. This is why we like to call it trustful rather than trustless. The focus is kind of in many ways the opposite. It's all about people seeing each other and interacting with each other, and the strength of those interactions build your reputation, which gives you the more accurate reputation on the network of the works that you've potentially uploaded to the network.
So this is a great. I mean, I really enjoy this sort of tangle of connections, but and it raises some fun challenges. So one of the challenges is, how do we begin? You know, and in fact, we might imagine that we could create a community of artists via RSong that could be the germ or the seed of a music community that's stitched together by a social network.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, this was the conversation around a social network, or something that I'd mentioned months ago, was what would MySpace look like today? What would MySpace look like on chain? And this taps into when an artist posts their music, when a fan shares music, how are fans rewarded? When a fan says, I'm going to go see this band, and they get 5 of their friends to buy a ticket, how are they compensated for it? All of these things are possible based on, what can happen with chain. The issue here, or the challenge, is, where do we begin? What's the first step? And if we can get a song right, if we can get 30 song right, that opens up the door for us to be able to create a whole lot more after that.
I agree, but I think what we're seeing here is an elaboration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like Kayvon, I think, rightfully has sketched out a kind of scalable architecture for uploading like massive amounts of content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this conversation is establishing is that there has to be a gatekeeper on that architecture that's all about provenance and identity. So, like, is this the actual rights holder? And so I'm suggesting that there's a KYC gatekeeper process in front of that, that is initially high touch, very social, and then after we get a network seeded, right? So after we get a network of, and I don't even know how big or how connected the network has to be, but let's say it's on the order of 10,000 people. So after we get 10,000 people through a high touch process, then the network itself can be, we can use the power of the network to vet a more high velocity, high volume upload of content. Does that make sense as an approach?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like, to me, it's important to kind of really, and it was really helpful, Greg, earlier on when you were kind of defining what RSong is, and RChain. So the way I understand what you were describing is that RChain is, so RSong is a let's call it an adapter that allows us to plug in our identity verification and music streaming and music-based social network platform onto RChain. So we can do it through the technology that Kayvon has helped develop, allowing us to properly utilize RChain, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the way that I perceive mycelia is that it's more of a protocol or a set of standards that's neutral, that is strengthened by Resonate's identity social graph, and so Resonate can provide the attribution, the verification aspect of things, and then we can utilize RSong's adapter to plug into RChain.
Right. So I mean, we're kind of running. Yeah, I've got 5 minutes. But I think what I'd like to do is something like, in the K. So let's imagine that there's a KYC process that's associated with the upload of the content. So the parties that are responsible for the content, or their representatives, identify themselves, and as a part of that process, at that point, they get associated with an address is associated with all of the stakeholders that are going to be a part of them, going to be remunerated as a result of the metadata. So unless they already have such an address, in which case they can produce it, and we can go through some kind of protocol that gives a cryptographic evidence that they hold the private key for that address. So at that point, RSong is kind of no longer has to be in the identity loop, right? So because the party has been KYC'd, there's an address associated with all of the agents that are going to be remunerated for the use of the asset. And then the only piece of the puzzle that seems to be missing is what kind of assurances have to be in place to know that all of the parties in the involved in the creation of the content have an appropriate relationship with the agent that is going through the KYC process and actually uploading the content. So that would seem to me to have to be a contract, right? I mean, in today's society, the way that would normally be conducted is, let's say, trying to think, the lead, let's say that the lead singer for Imagine Dragons decides that he wants to upload a new Imagine Dragons song, and he's doing the KYC process. Then he would, at the point of that negotiation, present the contract that verified, or that he was enabled to do this by Imagine Dragons, and that the distribution to was somehow accurately reflect, the distribution recorded in the metadata is accurately reflected in the is accurately reflected in the contract. Does that seem like a? I mean, I'm just pulling this out of the.
I think it's a lot of steps. I mean, look, if I want to upload a song onto Spotify, I can just do it myself without any KYC. And that goes across the board for all recorded material. Anyone who creates a song can put it up onto Spotify or onto any other streaming service, and there's no KYC associated with it. Granted, I'm sure there's a few people along that path that try to say they're David Bowie and they're going to upload those songs, but the mechanisms are in place to prevent those things from happening, because so much of already recorded music has been registered on Merlin and various other systems. Specific to future catalogs, this unreleased material, songs that are going to be created by the next generation of musicians. There is certainly a verification process that needs to be associated, but the hope here is that we don't create too many barriers of entry for, too many steps, as I would be able to release it onto SoundCloud. Now, the issue with SoundCloud is that there is no reward system, there's no money, there's nothing of the sort. So I would put it up there, people would listen to it, that would be the extent of it. But if I'm able to upload me and my piano and the demo version of a new song before I've produced it or put it into Logic and upload it, it would then stimulate activity within my fan base. And if I decide to pull it down, I could still do that and replace it with new information, the newer song, and be able to automatically inform my fans that listen to it, here's the produced version, here's the newer version. And the process of how my identity, I'll keep using that word, how my identity is associated with it. Look, if we could be done right now on Spotify and on SoundCloud without too many steps, there should be a way of us being able to do something similarly on our own platform.
Okay. There's a staff meeting. This is a rich conversation. Let's have this.
Oh, we have to get to our staff meeting
next week. This is good.
All right.
You're getting somewhere.
Or even before next week, because there's a lot of details here to work out.
Yeah.
There is a lot.